Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you to both of our authors for taking the time this afternoon to be with us. Ken, I'm going to have the first question for you. Could you share the premise of your new book with us?
Absolutely. First of all, great to be here, Dean. Thank you. He and I collaborated across coast just about as we've written a book here today, but it's great to be here. So, but for me, the premise is very simple. I mean, DEI is at the forefront of a lot of discussions at a university level in corporate America. And there's a lot of great discussions and theoretical commentary about what it means, how you define it, how you should navigate it. But this book, 15 case studies, what we'd like to say, very practical use, realistic things that have happened in my life and many of our lives that we've shared to create this list of case studies that allow you as a self-help, if you will, or in a group study to get at real issues, like issues that are very uncomfortable, but again, real issues. And it's really about helping people educate themselves as they navigate and move toward professional services. I've been in corporate America for 30 plus years. I've had a lot of time to tell you the unfortunate challenges I've had over that period of time. Your mouth would probably be wide open. But this is a way that we're able to share in a way that folks can learn. We hope people can learn through this book and have real discussions. I really believe that conversations are the currency for change. Conversations are the currency for change. And what we hope this book does, in fact, spurs some conversations as we look to change our approach and really our mentality toward diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you, Ken. Eldar, can you add to that and tell us why did you want to write this book?
I was just going to say it's hard to add anything after Ken has spoken. In the professional world, there's just simply nothing out there. We looked for any sort of guide, any guidance that young professionals, seasoned professionals, leaders, students could have about how to handle these situations. And moreover, what are those situations? You know, how do females feel about as leaders, for example? I did not know. I assumed everybody is the same and everybody thinks the same. And turns out not. Ken is on the professional advisory board for the School of Accountancy, and I've been bugging him with research questions, all kinds of questions. Every time I see Ken, I have a question for him.
I try to avoid them.
Yeah, I know. So, so I made it so that we, so we're co-authors. Now he can't get away from me. So, and I approached him and said, Ken, what do you think? Any guidance out there, anything we could do? And we just talked through it, and we decided that there's nothing out there. We just need to write a book. What do academics do when they want to learn something, right? They write a book about it. That's right, and teach from there. So that's how it came about.
Thank you. Ken, do you want to add anything to that?
I still try to avoid him, but no, a great collaboration, I would say. It took us over a year to write it, a lot of calls, a lot of late nights, weekends, help from a lot of people, but it took a while to write it. I'd like to say I learned through the process. Hope you learned a lot. I think you did through the process as well. And I think a good example of working together, kind of academia and the professional world coming together to hopefully put out something that's really practical, right? And something that folks can actually use. It's very tangible. That is our intent. And we hope that you all make sure you grab your copies, but hopefully you'll use it to learn and grow. And that's the main thing here. How do you grow and develop?
And I will just add very quickly, we may not be able to get through all the questions, but
we're no
but,
hurry.
But one of the things Ken mentioned that hopefully I've learned that has been an education process for me, and it's interesting that our dean has mentioned that we strive as a business school to identify the biases we have and work on those biases. And as I was listening to him, I'm like, I still have a lot of biases. And I think that is what I think many of us, we hope that at some point we will become perfect, and DEI we will be a black belt in DEI. And I don't know what that is. I still have my biases. I'm aware of them. I'm working on them. But I think that is what's important. And I think if everyone recognizes that, I'm not perfect. I don't think any one of us here is perfect. I'm not perfect, but here are issues. I'll keep learning about them, and I'll hopefully become better at them. Once you will get a black belt in that book, and then all the paint pain points that Ken and I identified. Once you become black belt in those, guess what? There will be new issues. Something new will come up. So this is a never-ending process that you will constantly have new opportunities to have biases, and therefore work on those biases.
So you'd say the important thing is to strive to be better versions of ourselves constantly.
It's a vector.
right?
It's where you're going. It
yeah,
doesn't really
yeah.
matter where you are as long as you're not going back, right? But as long as you keep going in the right direction, I think you should feel good about yourself, because there is a, what I've experienced is a lot of guilt, and why don't I understand? Why do I have this bias or that bias? And I think it's a good sort of prompt for change when you have that guilt. But it's not a good feeling to feel guilty all the time. At some point, you need to feel comfortable with yourself, uh, and feel comfortable about your efforts. Because I think we want to build a professional environment where people are, feel comfortable talking about the issues, feel comfortable understanding. Hey, what was that? Did I pronounce your name right? Is that how they, in your culture, how they do it? And oh, I'm sorry. You should always be willing to apologize. And that's probably my biggest lesson, is just always be willing to apologize if you feel that you did not get it right. And sometimes people may not forgive you, and sometimes they may not tell you what you did wrong. But again, that's okay as long as you keep striving, um, as long as you're on the right vector.
Absolutely. Thank you. And now I know why Ken's not moving to Phoenix.
Why he's
He wants to
avoiding me.
stay as far away from you as possible. Um, the next question I had was, and either of you could go first, especially when you start researching a book of this nature, what were some surprises for you?
So I'll start because this is my first book. So, I mean, you guys do this for a living. He does this for a living, the research and the books and all
You
that.
already have a book, I know that.
But anyway, it's kind of my first book, real book, if you will. And what surprised me was the amount of time it takes, frankly, to put it together. The editing process, how many you have to pull others in and get opinions and make changes along the way. But how intense, frankly, it was. You see, this is for me. I will never look at a book the same way. They're on the shelf, but there's a lot that goes into that. So that really surprised me personally. And the other piece that surprised me was I had to relive some of the really difficult moments in my career, right? So that reflecting time of, as we were talking through different points, having to relive some of that. And those of you know you've had tough times over the years. You try to forget them, but then when you've got to go back and kind of relive it, it's hard, right? So some of that raw emotion surprised me as well.
I will just add that, totally agree with Ken. And when we were writing this book, there's so much more material. So don't be fooled by that it has 100 something pages. We had so much more material, but there was so much thought put into cases. They were reviewed again and again by different people. We interviewed so many professionals. For example, if a case is about a black female professional, we would try to interview black female professionals and get their anonymous perspective. And that, to me, those are the most valuable aspects of the book. So don't be fooled by how short it is. It's concentrated awesomeness of 108 or 3 pages.
I like that concentrated awesomeness.
My guess is that Ken, for him, the learning process perhaps was more, how do you put a book together that's most effective for the audience that we were considering for this book. But the things for me, as I said, that was being educated, and I would imagine that as you will read your copy of the book, make sure you grab one before you leave. We've signed it for you. My guess is you will have a lot of points that you will see there. It will be like an aha moment. And it will be really rewarding, because suddenly you will realize I am not uncomfortable anymore discussing that with a person whom it might affect, and then apologizing if I didn't get it right, but just being sensitive, being empathetic, and being what Ken calls an inclusive leader in your communications with others, where you're not afraid to act on your empathy and use the learning that you have. So here are 2 points that I learned, and this was a big revelatory moment for me. The big one, the first big one was when I was interviewing a black gay professional about a case where a supervisor, and again, these are painful cases, right? But where a supervisor decided not to assign a black gay professional on his team uh, because he felt, based on the rumors and his limited observations, that this black gay professional was a little too flamboyant, a little too outgoing, and advocating about his issues that were important to him. Do you see how many of you are tensing up, right, as I speak about it? It's because these topics are uncomfortable and we need to sort of be okay with that. But as I was talking to this professional about this case, what should have the supervisor done? What do you think about him not assigning this individual on his team because of those concerns? I'll probably remember it as long as I live. He told me two things. One, he said, first of all, let's talk about this guy. Let's remember that this is professional organization, and this is probably key in how you view this book. We're not solving societal issues. We're trying to provide solutions for professional environments. This is professional organization. Every professional organization has professional objectives. And so whatever it is that you believe in, whatever it is that you represent, it's important, but it should not become distracting to your team from the professional objectives that they have, that your team has. So to the extent that you're distracting, you need to discipline that and pull that back within those professional objectives. And I'm thinking like, whoa, so does that mean it's okay not to assign a person if you're afraid of that? And then he struck me with the second point that I learned that I'll probably remember as long as I live. But he says the organization, as I see it in that case, is pretty much failing this guy, because if they know that he is distracting his teams by his behavior, why have they not talked to him? Why has nobody coached him about this? And I could tell him why, because they felt uncomfortable. Can you imagine approaching vigilant, buoyant? Maybe you can tone it down. This is very uncomfortable to do. And so I asked him, well, how do you, cross that? Then there comes the next layer. Well, you need to build relationship of trust with this person, so you can trust each other, so you can be, so you can offer him a feedback like that. Because he said, I have a mentor who offered me feedback like that, and it changed my whole career. And that's why I'm successful now. This he's a leader at one of the professional firms. And to me, that was like one of those revelatory moments where I just had to sit and think there, we a lot of people, like Dean said, who is responsible for this? The whole village, all of us. And so, when you start thinking about it in that context, well, there are several layers, right? If somebody is acting not the way you think is professional, it doesn't mean that you need to exclude them from the process of becoming successful. You need to help them by adjusting their conduct, whatever it is that you think they are not doing right, and be prepared to be corrected yourself that maybe their conduct is more okay than you think it is. So is that just sort of two-way communication of being willing to offer feedback and being willing to realize, well, you know what, maybe I'm wrong about this one. So that's one first big issue. And let me just talk about the second one, because it was also huge. Very briefly, and my guess is I'm answering a bunch of the questions that you.
Yeah, we're probably done with the questions by the time we get through.
I'm sorry about that. I told him, what do academics do? We talk even in our sleep, right? And my students know that. I see a couple of them are here. But the second point that was just absolutely revelatory to me is about how females view the world, professional world, differently. And again, who is responsible for the way they view the world? All of us. We impose norms, societal norms on females. We're not trying to solve the societal issues right now, but those are the norms. That's the fact. So they have a range within which they feel comfortable acting. Now, as a male, my range within which I feel comfortable acting is about like this. As a female, for example, my wife, her range is about like this. And that was a huge revelation for me. For example, I was talking to some female leaders and one of these female leaders told me, if you see a female leader, someone who's really successful in their profession, that's a truly exceptional woman, because she had to accomplish everything that her male counterparts or parts accomplished, but with a range about this wide. You cannot yell. Guess what happens if you yell as a female leader? If you yell as a male leader, they'll be like, boy, Eldar is tough, better. But there's still some respect, right? Maybe they'll be afraid, maybe they'll be avoiding me, but there's still some respect. If you yell as a female, there will not be a respect. There will be, almost a disdainful, like, oh, she's not following the norms. That's not what you will say explicitly, right? But that's pretty much what you'll be thinking. And that just absolutely struck me, because there you go, biases. We all have these biases. Um, and that was huge to me, and how females get to how they get to be advanced, how they get to how they apply for opportunities. It turns out that, we talked about it with a few of you. If a female meets 4 out of 10 criteria for some promotion opportunity, what will a female think? And half of you know, right? Well, I'm not quite there yet. If I'm a male and I meet 4 out of 10, I'm like, holy smokes, it's definitely a shot, right? I'm going to go for it and see what happens. I'll get rejected. For a female, whatever reason, again, I don't know why, evolutionary, societal norms, but females do not feel comfortable being presumptuous and applying. So in a way, they're more humble. But what many of them told me, and this is not something I would be comfortable with beforehand, but what many of them told me is, I would welcome someone coming to me and saying, hey, Jill, Jane, there's an opportunity that I think you should apply for. So they need to be encouraged. That way, it kind of breaks the border for them of being rejected. Suddenly, if they get rejected, well, Eldar thought I was good for it, so maybe it's okay. Yeah, but at least we both thought that I was qualified. But so those are the kinds of things that, as Dean was talking about, inclusivity, making sure everybody has equal opportunity, equal chance. That's what it takes for a female, for example, to have an equal chance. So understanding these things, and that's what we spent a lot of time rehashing and adjusting and fine-tuning in the book. Make sure that those nuggets come out, so that as you read it, you will understand how people work, how people think, how these, how our colleagues view the world, so that you could be a more effective, inclusive leader for your colleagues.
I mean,
Are we like
as you
past dinner time at this point?
Sounds like you
I
learned a
mean,
lot.
as you were speaking about women and women leaders and women employees, I'm like, yeah, check, and so, yeah, I think many of us can relate to that here. So obviously you ended up, with so much material. You were researching many cases. As Ken pointed out, you probably have enough material for a second book at this point. How did you pick the cases you eventually ended up with in this book? Like what was your process like? Like, why did you pick the cases?
Yeah, certainly the interview process and a lot of our discussions, we said, here are the ones that we want to put forward. We had a lot of content, a lot of people to validate and give some discussion points to it. And so that's how we really said, here are the 15 that we would go after. So we haven't covered everything, as we mentioned, and we know that. We state that in our intro. This is only a snippet of many potential cases and opportunities for discussion, but we wanted to start somewhere. The other thing, I learned about academics, and one, other than talking a fair amount, that's okay, is frankly, I was pushing us to get the book out. And I appreciate that thoughtfulness in your research that you do. But on the other side of trying to run a firm or a business, it's like there is speed to market upside too. And so we had some really good discussions on that. I said, no, Eldar, we've got great cases, we got great content, we got to pick some, and we got to go to market.
Otherwise, we'd be having this event like 2 years from now or so. And I will add, Ken has been humble about this, but Ken is America's leader on DI. So he sees things, they come to him, he sees where the pain points are. And I remember discussing some options for cases with him, and he would be like, yeah, this doesn't really what about this? And he would sort of offer ideas of things that are really painful, that he sees that those things happen. So what you see there those cases, they weren't picked for their entertainment value, even though we tried to make them absorbing. So you read, and they're based on situations that we've seen.
Right. And the ability to have the discussion. And I think that's the key. So as you sit around and read the cases, they're discussion guides and questions. But again, I think it's important in this space we have dialogue. Like what I'm really concerned about where we are today is we've lost the ability to have like just conversations and real true dialogue without people going in their respective corners and we can't talk. Where's the civil discourse? And ideally through this book and through the discussions, we can help facilitate some civil discourse on topics that are really uncomfortable, that often get overlooked and never talked about because there's fear. I see it all the time with clients I work with. There's frankly fear to talk about some of these issues, and I get it. So we're trying to break that barrier to make it okay to disagree, but let's learn together. Let's bring back civil discourse. And if through this book we can help do that, man, we have succeeded.
Thank you. You did point out earlier that the audience, like where, with the book, you're not trying to solve society's problems, but the audience is really professionals. Is that the only audience, or do you think some of the lessons learned in the book can be applied in other situations as well?
That's a good way to frame that question. Yeah, we the way we think about it is pretty much anyone who is in a group of 2 or more people would definitely benefit from this book. Professional world is a more straightforward case for us because we are both professionals in academia and in the public accounting, and we feel that we have the authority, the weight to start there. But everyone, like I said, 2 or more people in a group will definitely benefit from it.
So let me add to that. I'd also say students, I think at a university level, I said it this morning at breakfast, I have not read your mission statement. And the dean talked a little bit about inclusion and some elements, but oftentimes we're looking to you to produce that next set of global business leaders, however you define that in your mission. And my question is always to the dean or leaders of schools, or how in fact are you doing that? And so I do think in the classroom for students who will then work for a firm like ours one day, who will lead diverse teams, who have to serve clients around the world, to me, it's about helping prepare them for what they're going to face tomorrow. So I think down to the student level as well, certainly faculty and staff, as you're engaging, I think all aspects of what the dean talked about, from recruitment of folks, if you're a staff person running a group, or you could probably use this as well, right? I firmly believe that you can have empathy for what you don't have proximity to. And I think what we hope is some of these cases bring you some proximity, thereby allowing you to drive some empathy as you're working with people who are different from you.
And we thought about how would people who want to be using this book as instructors or for self-study, should we just throw it at them and have them figure this out? And then we thought that wouldn't be as helpful, so we carefully thought through instructions. And I know typically, what do you do with a book, especially one like this, right? The professional development book. There's like several pages of instructions. You just like flip through it, right to case 1, right? Instructions here are pretty important. In a way that they will be helpful to you. So we divided instructions by instructions for group discussion and instructions for self-development. For example, for self-development, if you want to read this book by yourself, we just talk about, what you should expect, how you should think about these things, what we think what mindset we think would be most helpful to you. Although honestly, as long as you read it, that is awesome. For group discussion, it's a little more sensitive, and as you can imagine why, even for a tenured professor, teaching these cases outright is scary. And I talked to some faculty members, they're worried about, what if I say something dumb? I don't want to be on YouTube, one of these viral memes that ASU fired another faculty member for saying something dumb about DEI. So we try to coach both the instructor and the learners. There's a section for the instructor, a section for learners, on what kind of mindset to have. And the biggest point we made, actually 2. 1, this is not solving society's problems. This is professional environment. And as you've seen through some more discussion, it's a little more limited. a little more limited of an environment. Let's take it one piece at a time. Professional organizations for now. So, so remember that, you know, if somebody in the discussion in the classroom or in a book club discussion, we have some universities starting book clubs with this book. If somebody raises it, well, like, what about the society? You know, right there, it's great. You know, let each other talk, of course, but then bring it back to the professional world, the professional organizations, because it's much easier to handle. The society is like, as like politics or religion, right? You will never agree. But the professional world it's easier to define boundaries. And to students, the second point, big point that we're trying to make is non-aggression. The principle of non-aggression. It's okay to feel guilty, confused, maybe even a little angry, but you must not be aggressive toward your colleague, your peers, and especially instructor, because this person has put a lot on a table to accept the responsibility for this class. So whether you are in a group discussion or doing it by yourself, there are some instructions that hopefully will be helpful to you.
Thank you. I want to thank Ken and Eldar for their time again today. Big round of applause for the discussion.
Thank you all so much for coming.